The grand hall of the Velorian palace was shining with gold lights. Long tables were filled with food from every star system, glowing fruits, steaming meat from giant sky beasts, and cups of silver wine. The alien guests were dressed in bright silk and metal armor, their faces proud and sharp. At the center table sat 3 sisters, the daughters of King Velorian, ruler of the Velorian Empire. They were famous in the galaxy for their beauty and sharp tongues. Tonight, they had a special guest, a human named Captain Elias Gray. He wore a simple black uniform from Earth, nothing fancy, nothing glowing. Compared to the bright alien clothes around him, he looked plain, and to the sisters, plain was the same as weak. The eldest sister, Princess Serana, leaned forward with a smile that wasn't friendly. "Tell me, Captain, is it true that humans cannot even breathe in thin air without machines? How fragile." The second sister, Princess Lyra, laughed softly. "I heard your people still fight with bullets. How old-fashioned." The youngest, Princess Vera, tilted her head. "And your planet? What is it called? Dirt?" The table erupted with laughter from the other guests. Elias simply took a sip of his wine. His eyes were calm, his face unreadable. He didn't rise to their insults, he only smiled. "Earth," Elias said in a quiet but steady voice, "is the name of my planet. And yes, we still breathe air. It keeps us alive." The sisters smirked. They were expecting him to become angry, to defend himself. Instead, his calmness only made them more certain that humans were weak. At the far end of the hall, on a throne of black crystal, King Velorian watched in silence. His golden eyes studied every movement, every word. He had invited Elias here for a reason known only to him. The laughter in the hall faded when the king suddenly stood up. His voice carried across the room like a wave of thunder. "Enough," he said. Everyone froze. The 3 sisters looked at their father in confusion. King Velorian looked directly at Elias. "From this day forward," the king said, "my daughters will be bound to this human. Each of them will marry him." The hall exploded with gasps and shocked whispers. The sisters stared at their father as if he had lost his mind. "This is not a joke," the king added, his voice cold. Serana's eyes narrowed. "Father, why?" "You will understand in time," King Velorian replied. His gaze never left Elias. Elias only smiled again, as if he already knew something the rest of the galaxy did not. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the palace, the first sign of danger stirred, and the reason for the king's strange command was about to reveal itself. After the feast, the grand hall slowly emptied. The alien nobles left in small groups, whispering about the king's shocking order. Some were amused, others angry. The 3 princesses walked ahead, their faces dark with frustration. Elias followed silently, his steps slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. Inside the royal council chamber, only King Velorian, his most trusted generals, and the royal advisor remained. The heavy doors closed, locking the room in deep silence. General Karath, a tall warrior with silver skin, was the first to speak. "My king, you cannot be serious. A human? Our daughters should marry the strongest warriors of our empire, not a fragile outsider." King Velorian's golden eyes flashed. "Fragile? That is what you think? Then you have not studied history well, General." The advisor, an old Velorian scholar, nodded slowly. "Earth, yes, I have read of it. A small planet far from our core worlds. But it survived wars that should have destroyed it." The king stepped down from his throne and walked to a large star map on the wall. With a touch of his hand, the map shifted, showing the dark edges of the galaxy. A red mark pulsed like a heartbeat. "They are coming," Velorian said in a low, dangerous voice. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who they were: the Xyrath swarm, an ancient enemy thought to be extinct. A species that consumed entire planets, leaving only ashes behind. "They destroyed empires stronger than ours," the king continued. "But there is one race they failed to destroy: humans. They fought them and lost." The general frowned. "Old legends. We don't know if it is true." Velorian looked directly at him. I know it is true. I have read the battle logs from the hidden archives. Humans fought with fewer ships, weaker weapons, and still they won. Not because they were stronger, but because they were unpredictable. He turned back to the map, his voice calm but sharp. A Velorian warrior fights with honor. A human fights to survive. And that is exactly what we need now. The advisor leaned forward. And your daughters, my king? Velorian's lips curved into a faint smile. They will learn what true strength is. And Elias Grey will have a reason to fight for us, for his family. Far away, in the royal guest chamber, Elias stood by the window, looking out at the alien city's glowing towers. His reflection in the glass showed a quiet smile, as if he already knew the war was coming. In the distance, beyond the stars, something vast and hungry was moving toward the Velorian Empire. The next morning, the Velorian palace buzzed with gossip. Servants whispered about the king's strange order. Guards laughed quietly behind their helmets. The three princesses were furious, and they had a plan. In the royal garden, under the shade of crystal leaf trees, the sisters met in secret. This is impossible, Serena said, pacing back and forth. Father cannot force us to marry this human. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then we make him fail. We show Father that humans are too weak for Velorian royalty. Vera grinned, mischief in her eyes. Let's give him challenges. Impossible ones. If he fails, Father will have no choice but to cancel this madness. They all agreed. By sunset, the first challenge was ready. That evening, Elias was called to the trial arena. A massive ring surrounded by thousands of glowing alien eyes. The air smelled of dust and heat. Serena stood in the center, her voice carrying through the arena. Captain Elias Grey of Earth. If you wish to marry into the royal family, you must prove yourself. You will complete our challenges. Fail, and you leave the Velorian Empire in shame. The crowd roared with approval. Elias simply nodded. The first challenge was the heat of Solaris. A chamber so hot that metal would melt in minutes. No Velorian could survive inside for long without heavy armor. But when the gates opened, Elias walked in wearing nothing but his black uniform. Gasps filled the stands. Minutes passed. The heat shimmered like a living thing. But Elias didn't fall. Instead, he moved slowly, calmly, drinking from a small pouch of water and adjusting his breathing. When he stepped out, sweat covered him, but his eyes were steady. Next, he said. The second challenge was zero-gravity combat. Lyra herself faced him, spinning through the air with twin energy blades. She moved fast, slashing from every direction. Elias didn't try to match her speed. Instead, he used the arena's floating debris, bouncing and spinning unpredictably. In less than 3 minutes, Lyra was trapped in her own net, floating helplessly while Elias drifted past her with a quiet smirk. The final challenge came from Vera, a mind puzzle of 1,000 doors. A virtual maze with endless choices, designed to confuse even Velorian scholars. Most players were trapped for hours. Elias finished it in 12 minutes. How? Vera demanded, her eyes wide. Your puzzle was designed by someone who thinks like a Velorian, Elias said simply. I don't think like a Velorian. The crowd was silent. The sisters were speechless. Somewhere in the royal balcony, King Velorian smiled to himself. Far beyond the palace walls, a small enemy scout ship slipped into Velorian space, unseen. Night fell over the Velorian capital. The crystal towers glowed like giant lanterns, their lights reflecting in the dark rivers below. Inside the palace, the sisters sat in the banquet hall, still frustrated from their failed attempt to humiliate Elias. This is not over, Serena muttered. One set of trials doesn't prove anything. Before Lyra could answer, the great alarm bell of the palace rang. A deep, echoing sound that hadn't been heard in decades. The walls trembled with its power. A royal guard burst into the hall, his voice urgent. My princesses, my lord, enemy ships have crossed our border. They are attacking the outer colonies. The sisters exchanged quick, worried glances. They all knew who it was. The Xyrath swarm. Within minutes, the Royal War Council gathered in the strategy room. A giant holographic map of Velorian space hovered above the table, showing red enemy markers moving fast toward the heart of the Empire. General Karath spoke grimly. We have already lost 2 colonies. The swarm moves faster than our fleets. At this rate, they will reach the capital in less than 1 cycle. The king's gaze moved to Elias. Captain Gray, I am assigning you command of the 3rd Defense Wing. The general blinked in disbelief. Your Majesty, with respect, the 3rd Wing is made of our newest recruits. They will be crushed in minutes. Velron's voice was calm but final. Then they will need a leader who can make them fight like veterans. The princesses were shocked. Father, this is madness, Serena said. Give him a proper fleet at least. Elias only nodded. I'll take the 3rd Wing. Hours later, in the cold darkness of space, Elias stood on the bridge of a Velorian frigate. The young pilots of the 3rd Wing looked nervous, their hands shaking over the controls. On the main screen, the enemy ships appeared, black and sharp like insect claws, moving in deadly formations. Elias studied their movement for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. They expect us to run, he said. So we won't. He ordered his ships to split into small groups, weaving in and out of asteroid fields, using the debris as cover. Instead of engaging directly, they struck from unexpected angles, vanishing before the enemy could fire back. The swarm's formation began to break. Confusion spread through their ranks. By the end of the battle, the 3rd Wing had destroyed twice as many ships as they lost. It was not a perfect victory, but it was enough to force the enemy to retreat from that sector. Back at the palace, reports of Elias's tactics spread quickly. The younger soldiers called him the unpredictable human. From her balcony, Princess Lyra watched the returning fleet and whispered to herself, "Maybe he's not as weak as I thought." Far away, the Swarm Queen listened to the battle reports with cold interest. "A human," she hissed. "How inconvenient." The next day, the palace was alive with stories of the battle. Servants carried the tale through every hall, and young soldiers bragged about being part of the humans' fleet. The 3 sisters tried to act unimpressed, but deep down, they could not ignore what they had seen. Princess Lyra found Elias in the training yard, standing alone, repairing a damaged Velorian rifle. He looked up as she approached. "You fight differently," she said, crossing her arms. "You don't follow the same rules as our warriors." Elias gave a small smile. "That's because I'm not one of your warriors." She studied him for a long moment. "How did you know how to beat the swarm? No one has fought them for centuries." Elias put the rifle down. "Because my people have fought them before." Lyra's eyes widened. "Earth has faced the Xyrath?" He nodded slowly. 200 years ago, they came to our system. They were faster. They were stronger. They thought they could crush us in days." His voice turned cold. "It took them years to realize we would never stop fighting. Even when half our cities were gone. Even when we had nothing left but stones and sticks. We fought." Lyra felt a strange chill at his words. "Your father knows this," Elias continued. "That's why he brought me here. He knows the swarm won't stop. And he knows your empire fights with honor." Elias's eyes hardened. "Honor won't save you this time. Survival will." Lyra's voice was quiet now. "You think we will lose? If you keep fighting them the Velorian way," Elias said. "You will." That night, King Velron summoned Elias to his private chamber. The golden light from the ceiling reflected off the black crystal walls. "You spoke to Lyra," the king said. "It wasn't a question." "I told her the truth," Elias replied. Velron's gaze was sharp. "Good. They must understand before it's too late. The swarm will not be stopped with power alone. They must learn to think like you do, to fight like you do." Elias hesitated. "You also know they will hate me for changing their ways." A faint smile touched the king's lips. "Hate can become respect, and respect can become loyalty. That is what I am counting on." Before Elias could answer, a palace guard entered, pale and shaking. "My king, Enemy scouts have been spotted near the capital. They are preparing for a direct assault. Velorian's voice was grim. So it begins. From the highest tower of the palace, the three sisters watched the night sky. Faint, dark shapes were moving between the stars, growing larger with every passing second. The warning sirens screamed across the Velorian capital. Towers of crystal dimmed their lights, switching to battle mode. Huge defense cannons rose from hidden platforms, their barrels glowing with energy. From the palace balcony, the three princesses saw them, the swarm, black ships like razor wings, hundreds of them, moving in a living wave across the night sky. The sound of distant thunder echoed through the air as the enemy broke through the outer defense lines. In the royal war room, Elias stood over the holographic map. Velorian generals spoke in rushed voices, arguing about where to place their fleets. "They will strike here," one general said, pointing at the northern shield wall. "No," Elias said firmly. "That's where they want you to look. Their main force will attack from the shadows, right through the asteroid field behind the capital." Several officers scoffed, but King Velorian raised his hand. "Do as he says." Minutes later, the sky was filled with fire. The third wing, led by Elias, launched toward the asteroid field. Just as he predicted, the swarm's largest ships emerged from the dark rocks, ready to strike the unguarded city. "Engage!" Elias ordered. The battle exploded in every direction. Swarm ships spun and dove, firing green energy blasts that tore through asteroids. Velorian ships answered with blinding beams of light. On the palace walls, the princesses didn't stay hidden. Serana led the ground defense, directing plasma cannons. Lyra took to the air in a fighter craft, weaving through enemy fire. Vera commanded the shield towers, timing their activation to block incoming blasts. The sisters fought with skill, but they began to see the truth. Even their best attacks were being countered. The swarm adapted quickly, almost too quickly. On the comms, Elias's voice cut through the chaos. "They're learning your patterns. Change everything now." Lyra's voice came back, tense. "What do you mean?" "Do the opposite of what they expect," Elias said. "If you're losing ground, attack. If they expect you to fire, retreat. Think like prey that wants to bite back." For hours, the battle raged. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The swarm ships broke formation, their confusion growing. Elias and the third wing drove them into a narrow channel between two massive asteroids, where hidden mines waited. The explosion lit the darkness like a second sun. Half the swarm fleet vanished in an instant. The rest scattered, retreating into deep space. The Velorian capital was safe for now. In the smoke-filled hangar, the sisters landed their ships. They were covered in dust and sweat, but alive. Serana looked at Elias and finally gave a short nod. "You were right." Elias only smiled faintly. "We all were." Far away, in the cold black, the swarm queen watched the defeat. Her voice was a low hiss. "So, the human will be my first target." The Velorian capital celebrated through the night. Fires burned in the great sky bowls, music echoed through the crystal streets, and the people cheered for the warriors who had saved their world. Elias stood on the palace balcony, away from the noise. He looked out at the stars, the same stars that now hid the swarm's surviving ships. He knew this victory was only a pause, not the end. Behind him, the sound of footsteps approached. It was the three sisters. They were no longer wearing their jeweled gowns. Instead, they wore the plain combat uniforms they had fought in, armor scuffed, hair tied back, eyes sharper than before. Serana was the first to speak. "We were wrong about you." Lyra crossed her arms, but there was no arrogance in her voice now. "You fight without honor, but with reason, and it works." Vera smiled faintly. "You saved our people. You saved us." Elias turned to face them, his expression calm. "I didn't do it alone." For the first time, the eldest sister gave a short bow of respect. "Then maybe being bound to you will not be as terrible as we thought." The youngest laughed softly. "Careful, sister. That almost sounded like a compliment." Later that night, Elias met with King Velorian in the royal war room. "The swarm will be back," Elias said. "And next time they'll know my tactics." Velorian nodded. "Which means we must be ready to change again, to fight in ways they will never expect." Elias looked at the glowing star map, his mind already planning. "Then we have work to do." The king's golden eyes studied him for a moment. "You have changed my daughters, Captain Gray, and perhaps you will change my entire empire." As dawn broke over the Velorian capital, the first light of the twin suns bathed the city in gold. But far beyond the peaceful sky, in the cold dark of space, the Swarm Queen watched her enemies. Her voice was like a blade cutting through silence. "Let the Velorians celebrate. Let the human believe he has won. When I return, I will take him first." The scene faded with the image of her endless fleet forming in the blackness, a silent promise that the war was far from over.